Hi everyone. Today what I wanted to go over is one of the most important steps in the writing process, the revision step. This is where you've created a solid draft no matter what the writing assignment was, and it's time to make it better. It's time to actually dive in, roll up your sleeves, and really see how you can make this a polished, finished product. Obviously that can't happen overnight, so I want to give you just some tips and tricks that have helped me and other students in the past make their work stronger so that you don't go in, freaking out or just overwhelmed, because that can happen sometimes. There seems like a big mountain to climb to get to that finish line, to get to the summit, and to make sure that the paper's as strong as it can be. But hopefully after the end of this brief presentation, you'll have some ideas on how to enter this step in the writing process. So, important questions right off the bat before you dive in and really get into the weeds. Kind of zoom out, look at your work from like 20 miles out and ask, what parts feel weakest? I'm sure there's a section in your work that you've always been like, ugh, through the whole stage of writing. When you look at it, it's that part that kind of makes you feel queasy. You just know it's just not the strongest part. That's usually a good spot to start. That means you've got the most heavy lifting to do in that area in your paper. And it's a good spot to begin with, even though it can be dreadful or you might be worried about how bad it is. Well, that's fine. That's the whole point of revising, is to spot those moments, to be honest with yourself, and to start with those because they're likely going to require the most energy, the most thought, and the most work. So let's begin with the weakest parts of your work. Another good question to ask is, well, what feedback did I get from my peers if there was a peer review involved? And how can I guess the follow-up question is now, how does that make me see my paper differently? Maybe there are a lot of themes that you noticed in the feedback you received that you wouldn't have considered on your own. Maybe you thought, hey, I thought this section of the paper was good, but I kept hearing kind of the same thing over and over from my peers about it. I need to take another look at this section and kind of re-examine and reassess what I'm doing there based on that feedback. And this ties back what we talked about a while ago, is to really be open-minded and experimental in that revision stage. So don't close up, oh, I'm not listening to them. Chances are, if you're getting a lot of repeat feedback about a certain section of your paper, that's a good indicator that it's time to dive back into it with a fresh set of eyes. And related to that, fresh set of eyes, have you let your work get cold? I can't stress how important this is. You really need to step away from your work. I know it's tempting. You want to just dive in. You want to be done with it. You want to keep working on it. But I have found over the years that one of the best ways to make big changes that benefit your work is to walk away from it, let it breathe, and then come back after a while, and you'll be amazed at how much you spot and how much you can do compared to if you were just 2 inches from it, for an entire stretch of time without any breaks in between. Those breathing periods where your work gets cold are crucial for you to be able to come back to it with a fresh set of eyes and really make some important changes and revisions. So I always recommend to students, start with the big stuff. These are the macro issues. Now, we're not talking about the surface errors. We're talking about the big, heavy, meaty things that everybody has to wrestle with as a writer. The organization, the flow of your work. Does it make sense that this section's down there, that this section's in the middle, that you opened up with this section? Or do you really have to be honest with yourself and start to shuffle things around to increase the overall flow and make sure that your readers can follow your line of thinking, and that it flows well? Another big macro issue, those transitions, somewhat related to organization, but the transitions from paragraph to paragraph. Are they as strong as they could be? Does it make sense how you're leading into the next paragraph? Is it feel natural? Does it feel organic? Or do you need to punch those up a bit and make sure that there's a stronger bridge, a stronger link in between those body paragraphs in your paper? And then I also put this one down here, paragraph clarity, because I find that sometimes students with their beginning drafts, they have an idea of what they want each body paragraph to focus on. But once they get a draft down, they see, well, in this paragraph I started here and then I took a crazy turn. And by the middle of the paragraph, I'm on to a whole different focus. Is that happening in your work? Are the paragraphs cohesive? Do they make sense? Do they stay to the focus, the topic sentence that you created? Or do they veer off course? And if so, how can you bring it back so that that paragraph is really solid and stays focused on what you intended for it to focus on? Paragraph clarity, that's important. Here I just put a quick little, tip or trick. Do the heavy lifting first before the surface polishing. It doesn't make sense, I think, to focus on the spelling and the commas and everything when you may have to remove entire sections of your work. And that's something else to be aware of, is it's not always just about the surface stuff. When you hear the word revision, that's probably what comes to mind. But as we can see now, it's often the really big stuff that requires the most work. That is really what revision entails, is really diving into the meat of your paper and working on those macro issues. But what about once we're done with all of that big stuff and we feel like, this is a well-organized paper, my paragraphs flow, they're focused, they're clear. Now I need to do what I call the buffing phase, right? The polishing. And sometimes, okay, yeah, I'm a nerd, but sometimes this can be enjoyable. This can be fun to really make your paper just flawless as it can be. So some of the common things I always see with student papers, those fragments, those run-ons, spelling errors, capitalization errors. Hopefully some of your peers may have pointed these out if you had a peer review. But here's one way to self-edit that I have, benefited hugely from, is I get into the habit of reading my work out loud. And this helps a lot when it comes to fragments and when it comes to run-ons. I think when we read our work, our drafts, just with our eyes, it's very easy for us to brush over those surface errors and think everything's okay, compared to when we're reading out loud, we hear the error, right? Oh, that sentence went on forever. I know that I need to break it up. I know there's a pause there. I need to do something to make sure that run-on doesn't exist because I hear it when I read it out loud. Or the opposite. That sentence just kind of ended abruptly. It wasn't a complete thought. I hear it now because I read it out loud. So really get in the habit of reading your work out loud. And I think that buffing phase, as I put up here, that surface polishing will come a lot easier to you compared to if you're just reading your work with your eyes. I should also mention, too, a great resource when it comes to this step is the OWL Purdue website. This is just a website you can Google. They have some great examples when it comes to everything grammar related, citation related. It's just a great free resource to kind of file away and use as needed as you move through your degree program in your writing courses. So take advantage of that, and that's all. I hope that this presentation gives you a better sense of how to enter the revision process of your writing, and please let me know if you have any questions.